Hello, today I'd like to show you Country Cottage. She is 9 1/4 tall, about 7 inches wide. She has one signature and it's quite full, quite busy. She's semi-soft cover. She has a removable tassel. And this removable tie is made from tea-dyed vintage bias tape. If you hear an odd noise in the background besides the traffic, one of my cats is scratching one of their scratch toys, which is great. Better to scratch that than to scratch furniture. There's a couple of hearts on the signature strings. And the front is made, there's a cardstock base, fabric glued and sewn, and on the inside there's a wallpaper lining as well, and linen, you'll see when I open it up. This is vintage doily, and so is this. So there's 1, 2, and then this layer here is, I think it's not just vintage, I think this might even be antique crocheted lace, hand crocheted, but anyways, it's slightly darker than the other ones. These are all their natural age color. And this picture was from a gift book, and I would say that it's a Sunday, so she's dressed in her best, and she has a very serious look on her face. I suspect she's contemplating whether to shoo a wild rabbit out of her garden. But you know, she's wearing her Sunday best, so that might not go so well, especially with the white blouse if she trips or anything. And I say that because yesterday my daughter and I were looking out the window at this one view that, oh, every year I go, oh, that's such a beautiful view. Between the work that the previous owners did on the landscaping and some work that our family added, it's just a lovely spring view. And while we were looking out, admiring the view, we saw, yes, a wild rabbit. Now, they're cute, but sometimes they eat things in the garden that you don't want them to, so yeah. Anyways, I'll bet you she spotted a wild rabbit. What I do with this while I was working on it is I would tie it to the side like this, and it keeps it nicely out of the way. You can even leave it like that until you've finished working on the journal, but that works really well to put it like that. So inside we have a vintage linen lining. There's the wallpaper I mentioned. And I folded it up to create a pocket, added some vintage buttons and a bit of vintage doily here. And this isn't vintage, but it goes well with it. I don't think this button is vintage either, but I thought it was nice with the metal on the clippers. Journaling card. And in here is, thought this goes well with the Country Cottage postcard. And there's the Country Cottage. What a lovely view that must be out that window and this window. And this is also from a gift book. Here's some ledger, tea-dyed ledger, a couple of charms, and a postcard with the Prayer of the Woods on it. And I think that lady there, she is collecting some roses for a bouquet, I imagine. This here was probably a dresser scarf, and I cut it in half. So this is the half that didn't have the deep staining on it. The other half had staining on it, so I'm using it for a journal for myself. But I put this one in this journal. Love the beautiful embroidery work here. I did some stamping. Made a little envelope. This is from my cluster box. Inside you can write on here, and there's a couple of tags for writing onto William Morris paper and a vintage button. There's room for more things to be tucked in there. And what I did with this vintage linen was I attached some paper and then I gessoed it so that it's easy to stamp on, easy to write on. More vintage buttons. And this little pocket here is journaling space. I think that's handmade paper. And there's some room here for journaling. Here's a little tuck spot, one of my butterflies, and a copy of one of my drawings of a wild plant. I think it's from up in this alpine park that we go to. Usually go there every year. This is from a vintage wildflower book. It's all done in illustrations. So I just love the pictures in this book. This page we have an envelope turned into tuck spot here, journaling. You also can journal on it as well. And here's a little tea-dyed index card decorated on my cluster box. And this is vintage rickrack, both of these, like the little mini stuff. It's cute. And inside here is a pocket with the journal card. And there's room for more stuff in there. Vintage doily and a lovely weathered mother of pearl button. Did some stamping on here. Left it mostly plain for writing. Tea-dyed card made into a journal tag. On this side we have a really old postcard. It says that it was art publishers to their majesties the king and queen. So this is before Queen Elizabeth's time. And some tea-dyed paper, cardstock for journaling on. Page from a vintage wildflower book. Vintage button here, some linen, writing space there, and here. And on here, tea-dyed cardstock. I like it when the dyeing comes out uneven like that. Reminds me of an old book. And I thought this went well with the cottage theme. Little mushroom stamp, full stamp, some fabric, a button, and lots of writing space. And on here too. And this side, we've got some vintage linen attached to some vintage music paper from Handel's Messiah. Hallelujah. And this side, another old postcard and some more tea-dyed cardstock for journaling on. Little mini tag with just enough space to write a little verse or quote. And this page is from a vintage bird book. And here we've got something that's been ripped out of a gift book. I think the same gift book maybe is one of the pictures up front. Little journal card. And an envelope for journaling on. It's been tea-dyed and there's some tea-dyed paper inside. And I thought this little charm went well with this. Wanted to tie that in a little bit more. Some vintage lace. And this is paper that's a copy of some dyeing that I did with maybe food coloring. Don't remember. This is scrapbook paper tea dyed, and then I add a little bit of stamped fabric to it, add some texture. And this is from an address book. Just love the pictures in that book. And this is some old trim. I don't think I've seen this before, but it came in with some stuff that I recently thrifted. I don't have very much of it, but I thought it went nice on this page. And this is from a old sewing book, vintage sewing book. This is from a rose book that I have. And this is from a 1938 book. Some of the things they say in there are so old-fashioned, and some of them are still spot on. Here is a lovely old button that looks like a flower, a rose, with some tea-dyed paper to write on, and I thought it went well with this, which is some tea-dyed copy of one of my favorite doilies. On this side we have a journal card made from an address book, decoupage, and some fabric sample here with some tea-dyed ribbon and a vintage button to go with the red. And this is from a rose book. And rather than cover up the words in that, because cottage lovers are usually rose lovers too, I put some tea-dyed paper in there for journaling on. Some more vintage rickrack and a tea-dyed card and lots of writing space here. And here's some more fabric sample with just need to open the curtain for my cat to go look out the window. There you go. Some tea-dyed fabric here with a stamped tag sewn on top. Some leaf stamp here to go with this page, and this slips out. Journaling on both sides and journaling here. Really enjoyed working on this one. I took my time. I didn't have it ready for last week. Lots of things going on last week. Good things. And so, yeah, didn't have time to finish it. But that's good, because sometimes when you take a break, then you come back refreshed and you do more things. I love these old pictures from the Home Gardeners. It's Better Homes and Gardens book. This is from a French and English book. And I thought this looked like a mushroom capsule. It's a button, probably a handmade one, crocheted. And I put that on there to go with that. Some nice tea-dyed old paper. And this is from Edith Holden. And I put a little bit of reinforcement so that the paper would stay together, because I liked it, the idea of having it for the center here. And this is from The Language of Flowers, and I added it to a doily and a small, I think this was from Muffins, one of those kind of, you don't think it's a coffee filter, too small for that, so it must have been from one of the muffin tin liners that I tea-dyed. It came from a box of cookies. Yes, turning junk into treasures, so much fun. Little stamp there, crinkly paper, love this printing. Mushroom stamped onto a piece of linen, vintage mushroom page book. Vintage button here, fabric sample there. Got a journal tag here, and used a bit of coffee filter to create a pocket here for some William Morris paper. And I stamped on some fabric and sewed that onto the pocket as well. On this side, it almost looks like we're being invited to a wedding. Lovely mother of pearl button here, and some tea-dyed ribbon. Roses, roses, and this slips out. It's an envelope made into a little journal booklet with tea-dyed paper. And in this one, turn it, and there is some journaling space in here as well, like I did on the other half. A little bit of stamping here, here, vintage button, some more from that 1938 book. Roses. I thought this went well with this picture. This is from my cluster box, except this is a vintage button. How to use your sewing machine. My sewing machine's probably mad at me because I'm always sewing paper with it, but it hasn't, you know, rebelled yet. And that's also made from the cluster box, and there's a vintage button. Card turned into a journaling space and a tuck spot. Vintage lace. And this button goes with this page. It's a vintage button. I thought it was darling. Some lace here for a pocket with a card for journaling. It's been tea dyed. Page from a vintage bird book. And this little button is either from a coat or from upholstery. I don't know, but it's definitely an oldie, and I thought it went nice with the colors on this page. This is a faux envelope. It opens up and it's a journaling space inside. And this is a William Morris tag that's just sitting right there with this little vintage paper clip. On this page we've got tea-dyed paper made into journal card, and I really like the colors on this and what it said, so I left that intact, and yes, created some extra journaling space. Love how this button goes with it too. This paper here it's the one from Handles Inside, a really old booklet. I put this washi tape on it there to strengthen it because, yeah, it's a bit fragile. Here's some vintage lace here with a little journaling booklet put together with some fabric on it and a picture of a flower from a magazine. And this button is so old, it's literally got worn spots on it. I thought the green went nice with this green. Couldn't resist. On this page we've got a little flip here for writing, a couple of sequins on the butterfly, and a neat old flower button. A tuck spot here, William Morris pattern, and here this slips down. It's a card made into a journal spot here, and then a tuck spot here. Extra journaling space. Because I used a lot of pages in here that had printing on it or pictures, I thought I'll make some extra journaling space with the things that I add to it. Because I couldn't stop myself from putting all these ones in. Like, it just, I love old papers. So, and this is a calendar picture, because what cottage doesn't have kittens? And inside of it, there's a tuck spot made from an envelope, tea-dyed envelope. And there's some stamping, lots of journaling space there. You can journal on this too. From a vintage wildflower book. Another postcard. Country cottages for sure. And this is from an adult coloring book, and it's been tea-dyed. There's a tag. Now, what cottage wouldn't have a little vegetable garden in growing with its flowers? And there's usually sheep in a pasture nearby. Vintage button. And this is from that wildflower book. It's all done in illustrations. Lovely artwork. This is a card turned into some writing space. And what cottage doesn't have a teapot? That's a copy of one of my little teapots that I drew and painted. Here's a tuck spot here. William Morris paper, both of those. And on this side, made a double pocket with a doily. It's fabric there, stamping, and blank on the back for writing. It's one of my butterflies. Tea-dyed writing paper. And then here you can write, and here's a little pocket with a tag. It's one of my little flower pots that I did. Stamping here, one of my butterflies. Here we have a pocket with 2 little mini tags in it and journaling space on the back as well as on here. Piece of paper that I thought just went well with this page, and tea-dyed journaling on. And this here is made from my cluster box, the vintage button on it, and some fabric that was stuck onto some paper to create fabric paper, and a little teeny weeny cutesy journal book, tea-dyed paper, and strawberry stamped on the front. Ledger paper. And now the last page. Take this tag out. It's got space for writing a quote or verse. And you can open this up. And inside here is writing space and a tuck spot for a card for writing. And this is all writing space as well. That goes back in here. And there's also a card here for writing on. And this is when I decided I was going to call it Country Cottage. This here of Country Living. This is from a Harold Smith magazine. This is cross-stitch fabric that's been tea-dyed. But when I saw this, I went, oh, I know, Country Living. Our place is in town that we live at. Our place looks like a cottage. But it's like a piece of country in town because we're on 3/4 acre. When you come into the driveway, you're just surrounded by trees and plants. Sometimes people don't even see the house right away. They go to the garage instead of the house because there's so many trees. Journaling card, lovely glass-like vintage button, and some vintage bias tape. Is it bias tape? Seam binding, pardon me. And oh, I love this old vintage button. Looks like a little star or flower. And this one really does look like a flower. That's vintage as well. And here's a little tag here. In the pocket, I've got a postcard, wildflower from Alaska. These are vintage buttons too. And this just clips on. You can just take this off if you want this to come off. Well, I had fun making Country Cottage. I took my time. Like I said, I was busy last week. But I think she turned out the better for it. Maybe a little thicker too, because when I'm rested up, I tend to go at it in longer spells and then end up adding more things. But it means I'm having fun. I like to listen to music, and usually easy listening classical or listen to inspirational podcasts. Hope I've inspired you to use cards and things you have around the house to create beauty. Beauty from junk. Because really, when you think about it, there really isn't such a thing as junk. I mean, everything can be turned into art. We put enough time into it. Take care. Thank you for watching. And thank you too for, your lovely comments and your likes and for following. Really appreciate it. Have a lovely day. Bye.